Hello everyone, I'm Jaleh Negari, presenting to you a beginner's assignment task for the Elektron's Octatrack. This assignment is a great way of getting to know the basic structure of the Octatrack's sequencer, the parameters, and a few of the basic features that the machine offers. It is also a good way of getting a feel of how much diverse sound you can get out of one single sample. The assignment is to create 16 different patterns in every one of the Octatrack's 16 banks, using only 2 samples, and where every pattern is different from each other. I will present for you a small section of the Octatrack's features that will come in handy for this assignment. I will take you through the basics of loading a sample, a couple of aspects of the audio editor, the parameters, the sequencer patterns and banks, and the arranger. If working with the Octatrack is completely new for you, please watch Elektron's Octatrack Know-How Lesson number 1 and 2 before we continue. We begin by loading our 2 samples into the slot list from the audio pool on the compact flashcard. Double press one of the track buttons and an empty slot list will appear with 128 slots for samples. To load a sample, you press the right arrow and enter the audio pool, where you can view samples folders on your compact flashcard. Folders are marked with a D. You can preview samples from the audio pool by pressing Function and Yes. When choosing your samples, you want to choose a pair that together has a wide frequency range. And for this assignment, you will need samples of some length. I chose these 2 samples. When your samples are loaded, you assign them to the tracks. The first 8 slots are automatically assigned to the 8 tracks, but you can rearrange these by choosing another slot with the arrow and pressing Yes. The sample slot chosen is highlighted. When you have loaded your samples, you can adjust some fundamental settings in the audio editor. You can access it from the slot list by pressing Function and Edit. The audio editor is where editing of imported and recorded samples take place. We will look into 2 of the subpages, the trim and the attributes. The trim page is where you can change the starting point with knob A and end point with knob C, or define a loop point of the sample with knob B. D, E, and F are zooms and scroll. Now go to the Attributes page via the Effect 1 key. Here you can adjust the gain level with the level knob, change the loop mode with the arrows between off, on, and ping pong, and adjust or turn off the time stretch function. You can switch between these 2 subpages while listening to your edits. The audio editor settings are linked to the sample slots. This means you can load the same sample in several different slots and give them some fundamental differences. When we now exit the slot list via the exit button, we can see the samples shown in each track. You can trick your samples directly by these 8 sample tricks and see when they are playing. Each track has its individual track main level knob, and when you press down the Octatrack's different knobs, you can turn faster. Pressing function will change the track level to the main output level. Each track has 5 parameters pages, which affects the assigned machines and so your samples. The layout of the screen corresponds to the knobs. The first parameter page is the playback. Here you can adjust pitch, starting point of the sample and length, the rate, and when the rate is turned to negative, the sample will be reversed. Retrick determines how many times the sample is retricked, and you can see the exact value by pressing the knob, while retrim determines the tempo of the retricks, from very fast to slower. Next parameter is the amp. Here you can adjust the attack, hold and release, the volume, pre-effects, and the stereo balance. Third page is the 3 LFOs. Here you can modulate the other parameters and effects. The main LFO page shows 3 speed and 3 depth knobs. Speed knobs set the speed of the LFOs. The higher the value, the faster the LFO runs. And the depth sets the modulation depth of the different LFOs, with 0 as shut off. If you double press quickly on the LFO parameter button, you will access the LFO setup page. Here you can view them to the left and choose what they should affect here to the right. Knob A chooses which parameter to model, beginning with the playback features from pitch, start, length, rate, and so on, further through the amps, the 2 effects, and the LFO itself. So you can actually also use the LFOs to modulate each other. Knob B chooses waveform, C is a mult feature which multiplies the speed parameters with the given number, and D chooses how the LFO should be treated. The last 2 knobs shows speed and depth, which are the same as viewed in the main page. The 2 last parameter pages are effects 1 and 2. Here you find the Octatrack's effects. By default, effect 1 is set to the filter, where you can alter the frequencies with the low cut, a high pass, a resonance control, the Q, and the depth, attack, and decay, which affects the filter envelope. effect 2 is by default set to the Octatrack's delay effect. You can choose between a range of different effects by entering the Effects Setup page. Scroll with the arrows and choose with Yes. Exit with either Exit or the parameter button. Let's take a look at the Octatrack's sequencer structure. The Octatrack has a sequencer with 16 steps. The sequencer's buttons, also called trigger buttons, has a wide range of functions. As shown before, these last 8 buttons trigger the track samples. With the sequencer you can record 16 patterns, each from 1 to 4 bars long. Furthermore, the sequencer contains 16 different banks, bank A to P. The screen shows which bank and pattern you are in. Here you can see that we are in bank A, pattern 1. To change pattern, you press the pattern button and choose a new one. Now the screen shows that you are in pattern 9. To record a pattern, you first choose your track and then turn on the rec function. Now you can create a pattern. To prolong a pattern's bar length or steps, you activate the scale setup. This you do by pressing Function and Scale Setup. A pattern scale window will appear and you can choose how many steps in total the given pattern should be with the Scale Setup button. From 1 bar, 16 steps, to 4 bars, 64 steps. The scale setup is now set for all the tracks of pattern 1. To exit the scale setup, you press again Function and Scale Setup. Now the Octatrack has copied the first pattern you made to the other bars. You can switch between bars with the Scale Setup button. A full lit LED will show which bar you are in. Now you can change the patterns in the different bars. And you can create a pattern by layering tracks. When you want to change to another bank, let's say bank G, you have to choose both the bank and a specific pattern to transfer to. You press the bank button, then select a bank and choose a pattern. Now you are in Bank G, pattern 1. And from here you can switch between the patterns via the pattern button. You can also copy-paste patterns within and between banks. Remember to deactivate the Rec button, then copy by pressing Function Copy, go to the desired bank or pattern, and paste by Function Paste. You can also copy tracks. Then you have to remember to activate the Rec button, and you can copy, paste, and clear tracks. Remember, this will copy both assigned samples, all the parameter settings, and the track pattern. The good thing about the different banks is that each bank allows new parameter settings, and you can assign samples differently. When you have created several patterns and you like to listen to them continuously, you press the next one while holding down the pattern button. It will show with a yellow light and shift when the previous pattern has been played out. You can also press several patterns down after each other, and the Octatrack will loop within the chosen patterns until a new set is programmed. The screen shows the course of the patterns. Another feature I will present to you is individual trick parameters, the so-called parameter locks. Parameter locks offers great possibilities of variations in the sequenced patterns and allows every trick to have its own unique parameter value. To make a parameter lock in a pattern, you press the trick down and adjust values. The trick now blinks with a yellow blink. The changes you have made will appear as highlighted on the screen. When releasing the button, the basic parameter settings will show again. To delete a parameter lock value, you enter the parameter lock and push the given knob you want to delete, and it will go back to the basic settings. If you want to delete the entire parameter lock, you simply press the trick and it will delete, and you can remake a clean trick. You can also copy a parameter lock by holding it, copying, and paste. The last thing I will introduce to you is the arranger. With the arranger, you can form a long sequence out of several patterns. To open the arranger, you press Function Arranger, and an empty arranger window will open. To edit, you press Function Edit and Enter. Now a window will appear that says Arrangement is empty. Press Function and down to insert row, which we will do. And you can see the bank and pattern that we are in appearing in rows. To delete a row, you press Function Up. Now I add 16 rows to make a straightforward course. Then I change the pattern numbers manually in the rows by using the level knob and navigating with the arrows. You can of course make any form you like. Now we exit the edit window and we can see the arrangement on the screen. We go to the top with the arrow key and press yes, and by doing this we define the starting point. Then we can play the arrangement. Now you can go ahead and play around with these parameters and your two samples to create the 256 different patterns. Thank you for watching, and a big thanks to the wonderful Nuts and Bolts crew for making this tutorial with me.